So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and those of you that are watching this recording as well. I'm Alice Payne. I head up business development and marketing at the College of Legal Practice, and we're here today in Race Equality Week to listen, hopefully think about acting and changing to help better empower and support ethnically diverse students and junior lawyers. So I'm really pleased to have a panel of 3 solicitors who have mostly recently gone through their legal education journey and their qualification journey as well, to share their experiences with us. So welcome, thank you so much. Just a little bit of housekeeping. So I have popped the captions on. If you wish to add captions, they are enabled for you, and you should be able to see a transcript. We will also provide a recording afterwards, so hopefully you'll be able to view it and look back. Too, feel free to use the chat bar just to pop any questions in. Thank you so much for adding questions to the registration form. That's really helped us and informed us about the event and what you'd really like to hear about. So we're really going to focus on answering your questions today. But if you'd like to use the webinar chat to either say hello to others who are listening and watching, or you want to add in a particular question as the panel are having that discussion, we'll definitely be taking questions from the chat as well. There's also a Q&A if you'd like to submit a question anonymously to us rather than on the chat if you prefer. So perhaps I could just ask the panel to introduce themselves. We've had a little bit of a shift around the panel depending on when you registered. There was a lady called Egbe who unfortunately is unwell, who's unable to attend. So perhaps I could just ask everyone just to say who you are and where you are in your career journey, just to start with what you're doing at the moment. Bal, would you like to start?
Absolutely. So firstly, thank you to the College of Legal Practice for the invite. My name is Bal. I'm currently an in-house solicitor at West Midlands Police, and I specialise in commercial property and commercial law. My kind of brief summary of my legal journey. So I did my undergraduate law degree at the University of Birmingham. I did my vacation scheme in my 3rd and final year at a firm called Charles and Hamlins, where I did my training contract. Once I finished my TC, I then qualified at a firm called DLA Piper. I was there for a year and a half and then made the move to in-house and public sector during the pandemic to where I am now. So currently in-house at West Midlands Police. So in terms of kind of wider legal network, I am currently the chair of the in-house committee at Birmingham Law Society. So that is at the regional level. And then at the national level, I am an elected council member for the National Law Society, where I represent qualified solicitors 0 to 6 years PQE. And I guess my kind of rationale for being here is that I have a vested interest in kind of the voices and concerns of both junior lawyers and in-house lawyers as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And Ramsha?
My name's Ramsha. Firstly, thank you for the invite as well. So I'm a newly qualified commercial property solicitor, and my legal journey hasn't been straightforward. So very early on, I didn't do the traditional A-level route, and then university I had a little bit of time out, always being told by people, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I did business BTEC and then went out to do different things, different jobs, including teaching assistant. And then I just found it wasn't for me. So I did a access course, and I was originally applying to do business management at university, where one of my tutors when I was doing the access course said, you know, you could do something else. So I really looked into it. At the time, I really enjoyed psychology. So I changed my route and applied for law and psychology to do undergrad. Did it, but hated psychology. So I fell in love with law, and that's what I ended up doing. I did the GDL and then the Masters and LPC and then my training contract, and here we are now. So yeah, I also do volunteer with the Muslim Lawyers Hub. So we try and engage and encourage Muslim students to have a legal profession. And we facilitate networking opportunities and just extra learning for them. So yeah, I think why it's important for me to get involved is because I've firsthand experienced going through barriers, and I don't want anyone growing up or being in the same position as I was. So it's important for me to create that inclusive environment in the legal profession.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Saima.
Hi everyone, I'm Saima. I'd say my legal journey probably is the more traditional one. Did my A-levels, wasn't quite sure, it wasn't always the plan to become a solicitor. I wasn't actually sure what I wanted to do at uni. And the advice I was given was maybe do quite a credible degree so you can go into any sorts of area, but really enjoyed the law degree, and I then did the LPC. Did think about taking a year out, but my mum, rightly so, knowing me well, was like, you'll never go back to studying if you then leave it for a year. And I think she was right. Thereafter, worked in a couple of law firms before I got a training contract at the firm that I eventually ended up being a partner in. Thereafter, took a break with the kids, but and now I'm more 12 years PQE, so much older in the profession, and I'm currently a director and consultant solicitor for a couple of firms, but predominantly in the litigation space, so civil and financial services litigation. I'm part of the Women's Lawyers Division, and yeah, really also nearly a year now, SQE supervisor on the College of Legal Practice SQE2 course in the SLS course, which I really enjoy. But yeah, from my perspective, just wanted to, obviously, like Ramsha said, give an idea of my experience previously and currently being a supervisor and a senior lawyer.
Thank you. And thank you for introducing yourselves. I mean, I know we can't all speak for, by definition, all of those ethnically diverse students and lawyers, and the focus very much today is going to be on your experiences of what you've seen and heard, but also your own lived experience. But what I'd love to do now is to hear more from each of you, maybe about how specifically that you feel that coming from a particular ethnic group or having a particular religion perhaps has affected your career positively, or how it's affected your study or professional life, and just understand a little bit more about that from each of you, if that's okay. Bal, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, I'd say that I kind of grew up in a very diverse community and region, a very diverse school, sixth form, university, and then Birmingham as a kind of legal community and professional community, very diverse. So from day one, it was kind of very easy for me to kind of integrate from kind of academia and education to the workplace. And I think that's just the kind of credit to the kind of the local communities here. But as someone that has, you know, the privilege of speaking to junior lawyers, you know, across the board from a regional and a national level, I'm aware that that's not the same across the UK. I'm aware that there's lots of people that as soon as they kind of finish their A-levels, GCSEs, and kind of get into university, they already feel that stigma of being different. And again, I'm aware that that kind of difference is even magnified when they get into the workplace, or even kind of the first step to the workplace, or whether it's the application stage or interview stage, where they see that they're not represented in the workplace, or even if they get into there, they just don't fit in. And again, as an in-house lawyer, I now have the privilege to go into different law firms to experience training events that, you know, a private practice lawyer wouldn't have. So immediately now I'm aware that there are certain law firms, even now, that don't reflect their local community or even reflect the legal market. And again, it's super difficult to be a junior lawyer full stop, because you're learning, you're expected to do long hours. The expectation of you is higher than everyone else in the law firm, but at the same time you're learning at the same time. And if you kind of get into that environment and you already don't fit in, it's even more difficult. So for me, on a personal basis, I was very lucky, super diverse. The firm that I trained at, Charles and Hamlins, it was, at the time then, it was a regional growing Birmingham office, so it didn't have tons of people. The few people that they had there were diverse, but that wasn't the same for every other office across the UK. And I would say that's probably the same for every kind of national/international/global law firm. Not every office will kind of reflect the kind of core values of that firm. So I completely understand how certain people from specific backgrounds may get into the workplace and they just don't fit in because there is no kind of representation, or the firm hasn't cultivated a ethos which is open for all. But again, I was very lucky that I was at a regional growing satellite office, which had all the opportunities and perks of a big international law firm, but at the same time was close enough and had that kind of diversity where everyone could flourish.
Ramsha, would you like to share your experiences? Thank you, Bal.
Yeah, so yeah, I think listening to Bal has resonated and hit me quite a bit, because his experiences has been completely different to mine. So I'm from the northeast, Newcastle, Sunderland, Durham area, and just very early on, I wasn't born in the UK, so coming over here at the age of 6 and 7 years old, I already had that barrier to, learn English. So growing up, being in primary school, I was just the color brown, that's the type of racism I would be getting because of my target. I was different to everyone else that was in my primary school. So growing up, bullying has been a massive part of my journey. It shouldn't be the norm, but for me, that's what it was. Because I was like an outcast and outsider. So my even secondary school, it wasn't as diverse. So it was a massive, massive struggle. And hence why people, because I was treated differently, parents had a shop automatically labeled as the corner shop. So just bullying was a massive part of growing up, and then that's where all of the self-doubt came from as well. So then that's why a lot of people said, you can't do this, you can't do that, just because I was different. And being in Northeast, which is very, less diverse to where Bal is, like Birmingham or Leeds or Manchester and London, it does have a massive barrier, because you instantly have to work 110 times harder than everyone else to get noticed, even if it is for your hard work. And then came the journey of me starting to wear the hijab and showing people, first on that I'm a Muslim as well. So all of these experiences, there have been a struggle getting in. Thankfully, my parents, they've been my rock throughout the whole experience. Most Asian girls, they're taught, South Asian girls, they're taught that, get married, that's it, that's your life, day in, day out. But I'm grateful that my parents have supported me throughout my journey and said, no, you can be more than just a housewife or a mother of your children. So thankfully, if I didn't have that support, I wouldn't be sitting here, at the place I am. So yeah, I think a lot needs to be done in the Northeast to get to the level that, Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester are. But it's just not everyone's in a privileged area. Not equality and diversity, yeah, we speak about it, but what are many law firms doing to actually achieve it? Thankfully, I'm at a law firm now where they are diverse. I would say they're the most diverse law firm in the Northeast. They don't shout about it, and I don't think they need to, because it shows what they're doing is diverse. So yeah, that would be my experience so far.
Okay, that sounds very, very, very challenging. And I think I remember hearing we did a session with a couple of Black lawyers, I think it was about a year ago or so, and the pressure they put on themselves. I think you alluded to this as well, Bal, to work so much harder than other people because they are in a minority, is something that I hadn't realized or heard, until someone had mentioned that to me. But that must have been the way that you felt, Ramsha.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just a lot of people don't understand, and some people don't want to understand, just if they're not in that race or in that ethnic minority group. But thankfully, the world is changing and more people are becoming more understanding, and they're wanting to learn about your religion, your race, your ethnic background, gender. So it is a really, we're living in a time which it's nice to see, but a lot more progress can still be done, especially in law firms and people who are in them positions, to be able to make that change, to allow that everyone to have an equal opportunity all across. And those people that work hard through determination and hard work, it shouldn't be a barrier for them to reach the same position as anyone else just because the colour of their skin or the religion they believe in or, their gender or whatever it might be. Everyone needs to have that equal setting. Oh, you're still on mute.
Saima, how is your experience?
So I would say probably more like Bal's, because I grew up in Manchester and in a very working class, but very diverse area. And my mum especially encouraged us to make friends from different backgrounds. She always said, the world isn't just Asian. You need to go out there, you need to have different friends. I was, lucky in terms of the area, because I think it was working class, the area, it was more diverse then. I can't say I had the same experience that Ramsha did in primary school or high school. I think what became a bit more clear as I got to college and university was more the socio-economic effect of, my background. That was more rather than my ethnicity. I mean, even at school, yes, we knew we were a bit different, but it was never called out or anything like that. I don't remember too much. Well, to be fair, I don't remember racism at all. I think I remember an incident once in the area against my sister, and everyone on the street, it was just very much a community. Everyone stood up for her and it was never heard of again. But I think for me, it was more the socio-economic rather than the colour of my skin or my background. I think definitely there was a different feel after 9/11 though towards Muslims, or anyone who remotely looked Muslim. I don't wear a hijab, but my sister does. And I remember we went to New York in 2007, and my uncle, who is in New York and who works at JFK, begged her not to wear her hijab just because he knew what she would face. So, definitely things like that. But I wouldn't say it was anywhere close to what Ramsha has experienced. But again, I think that's because Manchester is such a diverse city, and even more so now in terms of legal or corporate, it's like a business hub, the second to London, etc. So there are more opportunities. But absolutely very conscious as a mother now of how my kids will be seen, etc. I'm in an area that's probably not as diverse as where I grew up, but it's becoming more diverse, and very conscious of my experience and how they will, maybe also be deemed to, they're Asian, they're Muslim, and they'll just have to work that bit harder, which is sad to think like that still exists. But definitely I would say I'm very conscious of that, and I'm trying to give them as much as I can to help them so they don't have to maybe struggle as much as we did. But again, I think the area does, where you grow up, where you're working, does affect your experience.
Yeah, thank you. And one of the questions that someone submitted was about how difficult or easy it is finding a solicitor role as an ethnic minority. Saima.
I think for me, because I did the traditional route, at that time there wasn't any SQE, I think we all struggled to get the training contract. I mean, there were a few that had already had them when they were doing the LPC, but everyone I knew, whether from an ethnic background or a white background, it was just so difficult to get into law. Even on a paralegal role, because I think it's that vicious cycle of they want someone with experience, but no one will give you that experience to give you that job, to give you that experience. As far as I know, I've kept in touch with quite a few people from different backgrounds at that time, and we've all ended up qualifying, but it has taken so longer. I grew up in an area called Old Trafford that is really diverse. There's a lot of my friends who are from Black Caribbean background, and they've struggled. A friend that was through primary school, high school, the same as me, she's completely struggled on her journey as an Afro-Caribbean woman. It's just really hard at that time in terms of training contract. And what I do like about the SQE is it takes that away. It takes into account your experience, and you're not sat there waiting for that for that training contract to then qualify. It takes into account your experience, everything you've done, etc. So I think it's just, as a career, law is very hard to get into generally, from my experience. I don't know Ramsha, I know obviously you've had a different experience, but whether you feel it's easier now with the SQE, but I definitely found that it was just so hard just to get that initial paralegal role, to get your foot in the door.
No, I don't know much about the SQE because I had the traditional training contract route, but I did apply to a few places initially on in my application, and then it just got rejected. I got that unsuccessful email like within a week. But when I applied to where I did my training contract, I was very selective of the law firms in the Northeast that I wanted to train with. And at that time, the law firm I applied to for my training contract, they aligned with all of my views and beliefs at that time. So when I applied with them and I got that initial, you've been invited to an assessment centre, then COVID was happening at that time. So at that time, I still thought, oh, it's a great shot. Let's just go for it. Let's see what happens. I wasn't going to put in my application for that law firm. It was my sister who said, don't give it your opportunity, because if it's came up, it's came up for a reason. So then I went through doing a presentation, and then the assessment centre interviews, things like that. And then when I got my training contract, I couldn't believe it because I thought I did really badly in my presentation, but I didn't. It was just me being very self-critical, like I always am. And yeah, so getting that training contract, I didn't have any law experience before that, but I did have other life experiences. I was in teaching assistant, shop assistant. I've done all sorts that you can imagine. So for me, it's quite difficult to really comment on everyone else's opinion, but I think I got really lucky in the way that that law firm aligned with my thoughts and beliefs. And I think when you're selecting the law firm you want to work at, you need to look at whether it aligns with your own beliefs as well. And for me, it did, and that's why I applied, and thankfully I got it. And I think the reason why I got it was, yeah, I'm really good, but also my beliefs align with theirs. So yeah.
I think that's a really good point. So a particular piece of advice you received in your training, I'm sure that you keep returning to, that kind of helped you out as you were going through that?
There's two main things. One is I was going in my training contract, I was really struggling because a situation had happened and I was just feeling really low. And one of my colleagues, she was in a much higher position than me, and she said, focus on the positives that you do. Don't we're always quick to look at them negative comments and things, but look at all of the positive you do and write a list or make a folder or whatever is easier for you. Just make a list of them accomplishments and keep returning to them when you're in that low level. So that's one of them. And the other one would be making brave decisions for yourself. So you can work as hard as you like, but at the end, ultimately, you have to make a brave decision. I didn't do my newly qualified role with the training firm is because they didn't have a role in that department. So that was a brave decision for me because it offered me a different role, but it wasn't in something I wanted to do and it wasn't where I was passionate about. So as a newly qualified, you don't have a job in front of you, and I was scared, but I was willing to take that difficult step because I know I can't do something I'm not passionate in. And yeah, so that would be my two main ones.
Thank you. So Bal, just going back to the SQE, and we had a question submitted about how we could better support our ethnically diverse trainees to ensure favourable SQE outcomes, which is a very big question, but what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm someone that did the LPC coming from a law degree, so kind of the lived experience of the SQE is kind of far removed. And just for context, I'm just over 5 years PQE, just to put that into context as well. But in terms of kind of how to help current junior lawyers that are from ethnic backgrounds during kind of the SQE period. So I have seen the kind of stats and kind of the comments coming out of it. And I think we have at least 2 people within our organization going through a similar process. So very different to kind of my route, where it was literally you do your education and then you do your training. So they're kind of 2 very distinct parts. Now I understand it's at the same time, and both of them sometimes can be virtual. So psychologically, very, very different. So I think it just comes down to support, and support nowadays is very different to support what support was during my day. So back in my day, if you needed support, you would have like a line manager or someone you could go to literally physically day to day, that you could say, I'm struggling with this, whether it's work, home, whatever else was going on. But I think nowadays, I think you need that both in person and virtually. You need someone to kind of provide that pastoral care virtually and in person, because frankly, I don't think, especially at that level when you're that young in your career, virtual kind of connectivity and interaction is enough. You need that kind of in-person reassurance to say, this is what you're doing. If you need support, we're here to help you with this. Because if everything is virtual, you don't really know what's going on in people's lives, because we're all just on a screen right now. You don't know what's going on but in the background. And when you're a younger person and when you're a junior in your career, you're kind of dealing with so many different stresses. So I'd say the in-person support, the virtual support, and that kind of connectivity, I think.
Yeah. And I've seen some firms doing that increasingly so with those that they're funding through the SQE. So Brown Jacobson, for example, I think they're really proactively taking an interest in their trainees whilst they're doing their study, rather than just off you go, do your study and come back again. So I think that lies, the responsibility, I guess, there is across the firm and the training provider, between the two, to provide that support network. So yeah, Bal, you alluded to the SQE outcomes. So just for the benefit of people watching or listening to this webinar, the SQE outcomes are less favourable for some ethnic groups. They vary quite a lot across the SQE sittings, but there are some trends. So Black British students have the poorest SQE outcomes. And some different ethnic groups have higher outcomes and higher pass rates than, for example, those people who are white. So there is a real mixture there, but there is a general sense across ethnic groups that at present the candidates for the SQE are doing less well than those white candidates, and that isn't something that has changed since the LPC either. So the LPC, there is a similar trend there in terms of completion rates. So at the moment, the SRA are doing a piece of work that's been quite a long time coming. So hopefully they have said they are going to be publishing it soon with the University of Exeter, where they're meant to be looking at this in more depth and trying to understand underneath, the top level stats, whether there's anything else going on there in terms of intersectionality, in terms of social mobility, what else is there that's possibly contributing more to different candidates having quite different SQE outcomes. Saima, do you want to add to that in terms of helping and supporting students through their study, through the SQE, through their training? What's your view in terms of supporting ethnically diverse students?
I think the online platform really helps, obviously, with the like the college does, in terms of having the online platform to study, having supervisors, having one-to-one supervisors. That really helps. I mean, cost-wise as well, it's a lot cheaper than the LPC. It's more accessible as well. We've got students from all over the world. I'm quite jealous sometimes when I speak to some of the students. I'm sat in rainy Manchester and they're sat in Bahrain or Hong Kong, but that sort of accessibility really helps. But I think, as Bal said as well, it'd be really helpful in the law firm as well. I was the solicitor who was in charge of the trainees at my previous firm, and having someone dedicated like that, not just a training principal who has their name on the documents for signing off the training contract or anything, but actually we had an active group of the trainees that we looked after and supported them. I think that would really help, alongside them doing either face-to-face or online. I think the law firms should help with that. But yeah, I think having a one-to-one supervisor really helps.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Ramsha, anything else to add from your experience of supporting kind of those that are studying at the moment, particularly Muslim Lawyer Hub? I guess you're in contact with lots of undergraduates at the moment. How are they faring?
Yeah, so we also do a mentor scheme as well, to get some mentees and mentors. But I think what it ultimately comes down to is just having that necessary support and guidance there for Muslim students. But I think that also applies to newly qualified solicitors and early on lawyers as well, is that if you have that really good training and structure and support and guidance to give to people, then we're ultimately helping them individuals build their own skills and make a success of them in the career. So I think from Muslim Lawyer Hub, the one thing I've taken away is if you give the people them tools, it's ultimately up to them how they use that and utilize that. So I'm also with the Muslim Lawyer Hub, I mentor 3 students as well, and the responsibility is on them to reach out to me and build that connection as much as it is for me, but initially it shows how determined they are, and thankfully all 3 of mine, they're really determined, and I try and help them wherever I can possible, but it initially comes down to each individual to do their own part.
Yeah, thank you. So moving through thinking more about getting work in the legal sector, Ramsha, we had a quite specific question actually about how to deal with feeling imposter syndrome, and also asking whether the hijab affects your career.
So that's a big one. I could speak for a long time on that one. So low self-esteem, yeah, I do suffer with that. I question myself and my decision day in, day out. It was more, it's got better over time with the support I've had from other colleagues, people, and especially family. But I think in terms of how to help, I would say, 1, make a list of your accomplishments and keep returning to that and adding to that. Celebrate each of your successes, no matter if it's a big win or a small win, just celebrate them and know that you're doing enough. And I also would say be kind to yourself, because often I'm my worst critic, and I think most people are as well. So when you get that, harsh talking, self-talking to yourself, replace it with something positive, and look at everything else that you're good at. Don't just focus on that one downfall that you might have. And lastly, go out of your comfort zone, do things that you wouldn't normally try. So I've never done an online webinar, but I'm willing to try it because it's out of my comfort zone. So yeah, that's the first question. And the other one would be the hijab. So it's a tough one because no one's in the workplace, thankfully. I haven't had a bad experience, but if you take it out of the workplace, so network events or early on in the career, university life, I've had a lot of people target me because of my hijab. They've made it obvious. I've had comments as well. Why do you wear that for? Is it really necessary? And the tone people say, I don't mind educating people, but it's also the way people say it. Sometimes it is really harsh. If I'm at a networking event and people are just talking to the person I'm with and dismissing I'm even there, you have to question, wait, what is it? What is it about me that, is making you feel so uncomfortable that you are treating me bad? But the way I always say is every single person, they have their own experiences. So that says more about them than it does about me. So it all comes down to, thinking of the bigger picture. And if someone's not open and willing to have that conversation with me, then I can't educate them about why I'm deciding to wear the hijab or why I choose to do what I do because of, my beliefs or personal experiences. So it really comes down to, I've had so many experiences, but like I say, I could be here all day talking about it.
Yeah, it's important to hear them though, and thank you for sharing those. Bal, do you have any thoughts, reflections on that, given what you've just heard?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a really interesting one, and I think it's become a buzzword in the last kind of 12 to 18 months. So whenever I think about imposter syndrome, I kind of break it down into the internal and the external. And I think the internal is all the stuff that you can control, and conscious of kind of the audience here. So when you're a student, the stuff that you can control is, am I going to revise well enough for that exam? Am I going to prepare for that seminar or lecture? Am I going to get enough sleep the day before? Am I going to eat right? You know, am I going to get the basics right so I can optimize my performance as a human being or as a lawyer? And I think we all have that base level of control, give or take, depending on your circumstance. So that's the internal stuff. But then the external stuff, as we kind of become professionals, it's our environment. So in terms of, is your workplace inclusive? Do you have a supportive manager? Do you have a supportive friendship or family group? And I think imposter syndrome can kind of dip in and out depending on the internal and the external. Of course, there's stuff that you can control, but we all know there's stuff that we can't control. So if you have very poor internal control and very poor external control, them together is really when the imposter syndrome comes out more. So yeah, that's my thoughts on imposter syndrome, basically.
Yeah, that's really interesting. A couple of questions submitted, Bal, for you possibly to reflect on. I don't know, not necessarily have experience of them, but hopefully you can help. So there's a couple of questions around job opportunities for Black solicitors specifically, and then also the age of overseas lawyers. So obviously you've got lots of different people listening and watching this. How do you think things like that are affecting people's chances? There's obviously people out there are concerned that they're different in different ways. They're either older or they're Black or they've got worries or concerns about getting that job.
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to work in a mid-sized international law firm, a global law firm, and now in-house for the public sector. And I can say that I've worked with lawyers and non-lawyers in all organizations that come from all ages, all backgrounds, all colors. And when I was in the traditional private practice world, there was conversation back then about making processes more open for all. So whether that's blind recruitment, having a proper retention scheme in place, and now being outside of private practice, I can look at these firms now and can see that they're putting together kind of schemes and infrastructures where they really want to make sure that if you are from a different background, you can see what they're doing to support people like you. So in terms of age, in terms of kind of color and background, there is opportunity for you everywhere because I've seen it and I've seen it grow over time. Historically, that wasn't the case. Historically, if you wanted to get into a good law firm, you needed to get amazing A levels, university degree, and come from a top 5 to top 10 university. Nowadays, that's very different because of blind recruitment, because of kind of awareness of diversity inclusion across the board. So historically, yes, but nowadays, lots of more opportunity.
Good. Good to hear. Thank you. Saima, another question for you about international lawyers. Obviously, we do have some international students. They're not all qualified in other jurisdictions, but some are. In terms of the steps that they need to take to qualify over here in the UK. Do you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. It will be specific to their country, their qualification, but what the SRA does have is a list of exemptions. So if you go on the SRA website, you can put in where you're from, and then it actually tells you based on your experience whether you need to do the SQE or if you're exempt, and if you are exempt, what else you need to do in terms of getting your experience signed off, etc. So really, it is a case of going on and having a look based on where you're from, where you've studied, etc., to see if you're on the list of exemptions, whether you need to do the SQE or not.
Yeah, and I would say they're growing as well, those exemptions. They're
Yeah.
really trying to open that up internationally, but they've got to talk to every other jurisdiction to get that agreement, so and find out more about it. So I think it's SQ's been very positive, bringing it in the QLTS, which was the kind of international transfer scheme, bringing it into the same examination as the students that are based in the UK. I think it's been very positive for the international lawyers. Thank you. So thinking more, building more on kind of sector responsibility and firms responsibility, we obviously have some people listening to this who are from firms, either they lead on EDI or they're in the kind of graduate recruitment teams. What key advice would you give a firm, Saima, when it comes to supporting ethnically diverse students?
I think it's key to know your staff and what backgrounds they have. I mean, just to give examples of previous places that I've worked at, we had a social committee, which sounds quite funny because you think, oh, it's just for social events, but they actually did specific events they'd organise, you know, for example, Eid, Diwali, we're very well aware of different backgrounds. So I think that'd be really key, and getting the juniors involved, the trainees involved. So the committee itself was quite diverse. So it's really knowing your students, your graduates, your future trainees, their backgrounds, and, you know, people from non-ethnic backgrounds as well. You know, Christmas, there'd always be some sort of event. We used to have for Christmas, which team could dress their desk the best, and we'd have a competition like that, and it was all very inclusive. So I think it's knowing your staff really and being involved, and maybe having someone senior who is responsible, because every junior wants FaceTime with a senior, let's be honest. You know, when you start in a law firm, obviously you can't always just go to the boss, but if it's a partner, for example, and the committee's under the partner, you get some FaceTime with them, etc. I would definitely encourage the seniors to get involved. And also, when getting involved with the trainees, talk about their own experience, their backgrounds, things like that.
Yeah, there's something for me, I guess, that I feel like I'm just becoming braver on. I know that sounds stupid, but asking and being curious, and that anyone I've asked about their culture or their background, if it's different from mine, like, people are really happy to share, and being brave enough just to be curious and interested and ask people, because I think sometimes when you're so busy, you're rushing around everywhere. Sometimes we don't take the time to really kind of share and discuss those things, and having events like that kind of opens up those conversations in quite a positive way as well. So
100%.
I think that I'm learning as an ally is you can ask. If you don't understand, it's good to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, some of the events were very food heavy. So you've got your Eid events, and that is brilliant because everyone loves food. But yeah, it opened up the questions. And it was in a very informal environment. Even if we did it in the office, in the boardroom, but it was very informal. Yeah. And everyone could chat to people from different departments as well. It wasn't just the legal department, it was the accounts department, etc. Everyone would just mingle and get to know each other. And we tried to do more social events every month, really. End of the month, we'd on the ground floor, we'd you know, all meet up just to talk about accomplishments, and you'd get face-to-face time with the seniors from different departments.
I think, Saima, what you've just said about having different events around different, like Eid or Christmas, they sound wonderful. I wish more was done in the Northeast, even if it is you don't have anyone from that background, but, you know, going out of your way to maybe host it with different law firms as well. Because I've yet to come across that in the Northeast, but, you know, never say never, but it is something that needs to be done. And yeah, just hearing your experience, it's just, yeah, amazing.
And I guess it's also not assuming that the person from that particular ethnic group or religion is the one to lead something like that, Ramsha. Or if there's not representation in your team, you can still go out and find out about it between you.
Yeah, exactly.
If there's less representation across your team, perhaps that's why people either don't feel empowered to do it or don't know enough. Maybe they feel like they can't do it where they can.
Yeah, I think it's just as an individual, you have to do your own bit in society. So going out, like I say, I'm thankful, very thankful. I'm in a very diverse law firm. There are other Muslims that work there, you know, other people that wear the hijabs. So it's completely different to what I've experienced before. And the law firm I'm at now, I'm very proud to work there because it's different to what you see in the Northeast. You know, so definitely, like you've just said, more needs to be done, and you don't have to be from a certain background to put that idea forward or to educate yourself or to go out and do your own bit. That responsibility lies on, you know, directors, partners, people, and even us as individuals to, you know, put the idea forward and try and do something about that. So a lot of people are made aware of the ongoing issues that other people face and barriers that people have to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the early years teams specifically, Ramsha, are there things that you feel that they could be doing more to support particular kind of trainees from ethnically diverse backgrounds?
Like I've already said, I think the main thing is just having them like education, guidance, just that support and seeing how you can support people and giving equipping people with them tools to be able to do that. Essentially, it comes down to the individual to what they want to do with all of these tools. But growing up, I'm not from a diverse background. I'm a first graduate, generation graduate from my family. So I'm a first solicitor as well from amongst all of my siblings. And, you know, if they had that opportunity growing up as well, I know they would have definitely went into something else, something different. So it's just a matter of giving that guidance to people and seeing how people will do with them tools that are given to them, so that's a plain and balanced field amongst everyone. It's no good just coming from a diverse background and being like, okay, we're all in the same boat, because it doesn't apply to everyone. So it's really very much about being able to give everyone that equal opportunity by giving them that guidance, tools, accessibility, just having them conversations early on, whether it's through school, A levels, whatever it might be, to help people to achieve and, do their best and see where they can go. But if you don't have them tools or guidance from early on, then, I got very lucky because I was very supported from my family. From teachers early on, and now my colleagues, they're very supportive of me. As soon as they found out I was doing this, they've been wishing me good luck, and it's really nice to see. But someone else, they might not have that opportunity, so it's just raising education and also giving people them tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Bal, what would you like to see in terms of fostering a more better and diverse environment for progression as well, obviously for entering the profession, but for progression as well?
Yeah, for me, it kind of comes down to recruitment and retention. And when we talk about recruitment, it goes back to kind of the blind recruitment process, not only kind of names, but kind of where they went in terms of education and any other kind of element which may kind of unconsciously bias people in certain kind of decisions that they make. But even before you get to that stage, I think when especially the larger law firms have the resources to go to different places, make sure you're going to different places. There's no point going to, the Oxfords and Cambridges, because you're only going to get one type of person that comes from there. Are you going to the north? Are you going to the east, the south, the Midlands? Making sure you're, showing yourself to a wider pool of talent. So that in terms of recruitment. And I think the recruitment process, in terms of kind of interviews as well, making sure the interview panel or whoever makes the decision is made up of diverse people. And I'm talking about diversity across all strands: gender, disability, religion, belief, background, you name it. Because, sitting on interview panels in the past, having people from different backgrounds, everyone brings a different perspective. And ultimately, you get the best candidate when you have a better interview panel. So that in terms of recruitment. And then the next big R is retention, which I don't think a lot of people have kind of caught up upon. I think a lot of recruitment people in organizations think that they've ticked the box as soon as they brought the talent in, but you need to keep the talent as well. There's been so many instances where I've known super talented lawyers getting into amazing law firms, but within a year or two, they've realized this isn't for me. They were kind of given this fantastic kind of marketing about this organization. They kind of went through the honeymoon period, and then they slowly realized this isn't for me. This doesn't represent me. So I think focus on your kind of recruitment strategy, and if that's correct, but then also, commit that same energy to retention as well. And if you do that, ultimately the business will prosper because they're not having to kind of rehire every 2-3 years. So the two R's for me: recruitment and then retention.
Yeah, and I feel like graduate recruitment possibly is moving more quickly than recruitment into the more senior roles. I don't know if that's fair to say, but it appears that graduate recruitment seems to be becoming more inclusive and more aware of certainly the things they should be considering to make sure it is inclusive. And I'm not sure when you look at the senior positions whether that falls back to people's CVs more very, very specific people that they're looking for with a specific background. I don't know if that's fair. Is that fair, Saima? I don't know.
From my experience, not so much, I think, to be honest. I'll be honest with you. I mean, my last role was for a non-legal company, an international one. And to give you an idea, we still joke about it, but I was the only female on the board. it was all men. And I didn't have any issues. I mean, I was, you know, I don't know whether it's my personality or anything, but I think when it came to the recruitment, there definitely wasn't. I think it's because you've got that qualification, you've got the experience. So it's difficult to say no to someone who is actually a fit into what you need because they've got so much experience. I can't say if that's the same for everyone else, but like I said, I was the only one in the, I didn't even realize it at the time. It was only when I was having a conversation with my mum that I was like, actually my morning meetings, I'm literally the only one. I'm also the only Manchester City fan, so that I used to get it in the neck for that. But that was probably, but I could hold my own with that. But I never felt like I was discriminated against. And I think even with getting that role, it was, here's my experience and this is what I do. So,
yeah,
you know,
really,
take me on.
very positive to share that. Thank you all. I'm just going to pause to invite people to pop some questions in the chat. I can allow people to talk if I'm able to, if anyone wants to actually give us a question in the old-fashioned way, or you can chat it and add it into the box. So yes, if there's anything that you've heard that's prompted you to question something or something in particular that we've missed, because I know we haven't answered every single question that was submitted. Now is your time. So yeah, please send it our way. I also just at this point, I'll mention a piece of work that the Law Society did back in 2020, which I will just pop in the chat. And it there was a big survey of Black, Asian, and I think minority solicitors, and it did come through that there were retention rates were lower, particularly in the large city firms, Bal, compared to their white peers, and they can see slower career development. But it's great. It sounds like that's not always the case. It really does sound like finding the right firm feels really, really critical. In all of your stories and experiences, it sounds like there are more firms out there that are really seeking inclusivity and very active around that. But it feels like that's the main kind of point that I'm taking away from yourselves, is there are some really, really good employers out there who are doing this very well, but it's not everyone's experience yet. Any questions from anyone? Well, hopefully it's been helpful. I'm just going to wrap up in terms of asking everyone to finish off in terms of what you'd particularly like to see happen, and it may be continuing some of the good practice that you've seen and experienced. So perhaps I can just ask each of you to just share what would you want to change immediately and what you'd like to see happen in the profession in terms of encouraging inclusion and progression, particularly for ethnically diverse lawyers. So Saima, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think something that I found really fascinating, and I think more firms should do this. I'll be speaking to my firm about it as well. My friend works for quite a large international firm, and she told me that they've started a reverse mentoring scheme. And she has found that so enlightening. So her mentor is from an ethnic background, a few management levels below her, and she actually thought she was quite aware of diversity, but since meeting him, speaking to him, she's realized how much she doesn't know. And I think that is a brilliant idea if more organizations could do that, to encourage it across the board, to have the reverse mentoring, and also possibly whether the SRA are working on this, I think to factor in the socio-economic factors linked with ethnicity, and in terms of the stats and what more can be done for those from poorer backgrounds to help them with qualification, etc. I think I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, thank you. Ramsha.
So I would say more events, catering for different people and different backgrounds, especially creating that safe environment to be able to, listen to everyone and put your opinions across as well. But above that, even in networking events from the Northeast, I would like to see more, like maybe, for example, more non-alcoholic options. Also catering as well, so more either halal or vegetarian options as well. So just little things like that I think make a massive and big impact. So that's something I would like to see more.
Thank you. Bal?
In terms of what I'd like to see, I'd just like to see law firms kind of reflect who their clients are and who the public are through their lawyers. And I think a lot of times you don't see that. I've literally been at events at nice law firms. You walk on the street and there seems to be a massive disconnect. So that's what I'd like to see. And then if I could make a change immediately, this is a bit radical, but I'd like to see the SRA increase or enable to have kind of powers to kind of fine and sanction firms that, one, don't disclose diversity data, and two, if that diversity data is poor, then sanction them. And I think until law firms are impacted financially, they won't make the changes quick enough. So I think if I could make a change like that, that's what it would be.
Yeah, and one of the first steps, thank you, for a lot of these kind of things is if you're not measuring it, how can you know that either you're improving it, or how can you know how bad or good it is? So I think that is one of definitely the key pillars of any EDI framework, isn't it? About making sure you really are measuring it and you do know where you have your gaps. So, you know, for the college, for example, this is the first year where we've measured our diversity across our supervisors and across our staff and across our students. And there's some really positive things in there in terms of actually ethnic diversity is very strong. But there are also certain things where, like, our supervisors are predominantly women. The diversity of our supervisors is less strong than our core staff team. So we do have definitely areas where we aren't yet, you know, as inclusive as we want to be. But we didn't know that if we didn't run the surveys, we wouldn't have had any insight on that. So yeah, I absolutely think that's important. Thank you. Well, I think that wraps up the webinar. I'm thinking there might be some undergraduates or ethnically diverse kind of quite junior lawyers here. So again, if there's anything we've missed that you'd like to share, we just have a minute or so. Or I think your stories have all been very motivational for them, and they've probably got lots of things to think about. Is there anything you would like to add to that particular audience as we end?
I would just like to add as a final note is don't let your differences, you know, be a barrier. Don't just, a lot of people might say something, but don't let that be a negative factor. Rise above it and try your hardest. And if it's, you know, you put your mind to it, then you'll definitely get where you're supposed to be and achieve everything you want. So definitely, if one thing you want to take out of here today is don't let any barrier, you know, keep you from achieving your goals.
Yeah, I would concur with that. Hard work, that's all my parents ever said. Hard work will get you far, and it will. And also, just the best advice I got as a law graduate was the legal world is a small place. And I suppose it's even smaller now with everything, with a lot of stuff being remote. So you get reputations quite quickly. So get yourself the best reputation you can from the start, and your hard work will be recognised.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Literally just keep working harder and stay positive, regardless of your background, your age. Think about your future as opposed to, you know, your past.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We will certainly share this with everyone. Thank you for all your time that you've given us on the panel. I'm aware some people submitted some questions about the SQE. We could have spent an hour probably just talking about the SQE. So I popped a couple of links to two webinars coming up. If you are interested in finding out more about the SQE, we have separate sessions that will be dedicated completely to that. And we'll send you all the recordings. So yeah, thanks for joining us. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.